Okay, go ahead.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Now, I'm Paul Raggett. I'm the event director for London Canna Group. Hopefully, I might be becoming a bit more of a familiar face to you now with all of our LCG Coffee Mornings. Well, we'll crack straight on. Today, we're joined by Robert Jappie. Now, Robert is a partner at the law firm Ince, specialising in cannabis law and regulation. Since he led the UK's first dedicated cannabis law department in May 2018, Robert has become a well-respected legal expert within Europe's fast-growing cannabis industries. He currently acts for several established CBD brands, licensed producers, medical cannabis companies and distributors, advising on the full range of regulatory and commercial issues facing the sector. As a result, Robert has become the leading legal authority on the developing regulatory environment both here in the UK and in Europe. In March 2019, Robert travelled to Brussels to present alongside counsel to the European Commission's Working Group on Novel Foods on behalf of the UK CBD industry. He has also been involved in regulatory challenges to widen patient and consumer access to cannabis-derived products. From his previous work at Release and with 10 years prior experience as a criminal defence litigator, Robert has a unique insight into the complexities of global drug policy, life science regulation, and proceeds of crime-related matters. So thanks very much for joining us today, guys, and obviously thanks for joining us, Robert. Looking forward to having a chat with you.
No, good morning. Thank you for having me. I wrote that profile myself, so yeah, I've designated myself as one of the leading authorities, so there you go.
That's good. It was a great profile, actually, a great bio, Robert. You look like obviously...
spent a lot of time on that.
I was going to say, are you sure you didn't have someone else write that one?
No, that's all me.
So, no, well, thanks a lot. If you can tell us a little bit more about your background, especially, with some of your work that you did at Release as well, and then pretty much how you sort of stepped into, well, the cannabis space.
Yeah, so I was a criminal defence lawyer for about 12 years. And then in the middle of that, I took a break to go and study a master's degree. And I ended up working at Release and their legal team for a couple of years. Release is a drugs and human rights charity based in Shoreditch, and they campaign for the decriminalisation of drug possession. They think drug use should be a public health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. So whilst I was there, I was doing a lot of policy work and lobbying work, and I was writing articles about legalization of cannabis rolling out across the US. I was also born on 420 as well, so I think there's a good connection there.
Excellent.
And just at the time, I just remember thinking, cannabis is going to be big business here in Europe one day. When it comes to Europe, you've got combined population of the US and Canada of about 350 million. You've got 600, 700 million people in Europe. So it was just something that kept nagging at me, and it was just a dream to set up a cannabis law department, which I did probably about 2.5 years ago. At the time, May 2018, there was a small CBD industry here in the UK, but it was growing very quickly. And then 6 months later, suddenly the Home Office legalised medicinal cannabis, much to everyone's surprise. So things just really snowballed from there. So as of about December 2018, all I've been doing is regulatory and commercial advice for CBD companies and medicinal cannabis companies, and that's where I am now.
Excellent. So, well, we'll dive straight in really with the question really that's on everyone's minds. It's the new guidelines that are coming in the UK with regards to the novel foods and the FSA. Now, I understand they're coming March 2021. So, is there any advice really that you'd give to UK brands and obviously non-UK brands really looking to get into the market? Because we understand that there can be some major pitfalls, let's say, with regards to the regulations if it's not adhered to correctly.
Yeah, so everyone's trying to get to grips with what novel food compliance means. The FSA has been very, very clear. CBD is not a narcotic, it's a food, it's a novel food, and they will not be changing their deadline that they've set in place, the 31st of March 2021. So all CBD companies need to be able to assert novel food compliance by that date. Otherwise, they won't be allowed to continue selling, and they will risk intervention from trading standards. Now, what asserting novel food compliance actually means is potentially two things. Okay, so if you are an ingredients manufacturer, so if you're producing bulk volumes of distillate or isolate, then the likelihood is you will need your own submission. You can either do it on your own, so you can instruct a lab to carry out all the necessary studies. It's a long, complex, and expensive scientific safety submission, or you can join one of the consortiums. So there's a couple of very good consortium approaches here in the UK at the moment. You've got the ACI, and you've got IA, the European Industrial Hemp Association. So a lot of companies are choosing to join the consortiums, share that cost burden, and collaborate with others to get a complete dossier submission in. If you are not a manufacturer of bulk products, maybe you're a white labeling company and you're buying in your product, then the likelihood is you will still need your own submission, or you can team up with your supplier and make sure that your formulations are included in their submission. So there's a lot of collaboration in that respect. And then finally, if you are a CBD brand and you are having someone white label your products, the idea is that if they are novel food compliant and their products are safe, you should be able to assert novel food compliance via their submission. If you are having your products private labeled, so it's your own formulations, then you'll probably need your own submission to make sure that your formulations have been submitted to the FSA and are part of a validated submission. So there's a lot of aspects to it. If you're a CBD company and you haven't started addressing this issue, then you are very, very late in the day, and I would advise you to get cracking.
Yeah, and going back to your last point there, with regards to any changes to the formula of the actual manufacturer, if it hasn't been submitted in the exact way that the manufacturer is producing it for you, like you say, you probably will need your own submission. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have a white label company making your products for you, and you're using their formulations, the likelihood is they will have had their formulations submitted as part of a complete dossier. So you shouldn't need your own submission. However, if you are having your products private labeled, with your own formulations, and they are particularly complex, then the likelihood is you will need to make your own submission in relation to those formulations. In terms of how complex it is, if you're producing different flavors, if you're adding in different ingredients in addition to the CBD, the more complex it is, the more likely you are to need your own submission.
Yeah, and with regards to the timelines for that submission.
We have a follow-up question from one of the attendees. Anthony is asking, can you expand on what you mean by formulation, please?
So it really depends on your product line. So for example, if you have 3 fairly simple tinctures, 5%, 10%, 15%, that would be generally considered a fairly straightforward formulation. So we're talking about your finished product here. If you go to a white label company and they say, yes, we've made submissions for 5%, 10%, 15%, you can ask them to make those for you. You put your brand on them. You do not need your own submission because you can assert novel food compliance via their submission. If their formulations, their basic formulations, are not what you want and you want something more complex, so a more complex formulation for your finished product, different flavors, maybe you're putting in other sort of herbal ingredients, valerian, or all of these other things that people are using, that then becomes a different formulation. The composition of the finished product has changed, and that would need its own submission.
Right, thanks, Robert. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. So, with regards to that, though, leading on for it, what sort of timelines would we be talking for the submission process? If someone, because some people may be thinking, oh, well, I've got the products directly from my supplier, I'm good to go. But like you say, if they haven't adapted it in some way, what sort of timelines would they be looking at?
So look, the central part to a novel food submission is the toxicology study. That's a long and expensive process. The time estimates given vary. I think the ACI are saying that study takes about 8 or 9 months. IA are talking about an 18-month study. So you can imagine if you wanted to do your own novel food submission and do all of your own studies yourself, then you're too late. The idea of being in a consortium is that you can rely on that central toxicology submission. Now, interestingly, with the IRA situation, if they're saying that their toxicology study is going to take 18 months, that takes you well beyond the FSA's cutoff date. What the FSA have intimated is that provided you show a commitment to preparing a detailed toxicology study, they will still accept your submission. They will validate it before the 31st of March, and they will allow you to add that complex data at a later date. So that appears to be the IRA position. I think the ACI, they're expecting to complete their toxicology study in time for the 31st of March submission. But IRA is putting in a submission which will be validated, and then they'll add the toxicology data to it thereafter. In fact, if you go back a couple of months to Mile High Labs and their press release when they announced that they had a validated submission in, if you read it very carefully, it appeared that they also confirmed their toxicology data had not been submitted as part of the dossier, and that they would be adding it to the dossier at a later date. So in terms of doing just a safety analysis for a finished product, that can actually be done relatively quickly, and you would still have time. But for the bulk ingredients, the isolates, the distillates, then that toxicology study should have been started months ago.
Right. Okay. Great. So the other thing as well, with regards to the new EU guidelines or potential changes in the EU guidelines, with them looking at CBD as a narcotic, because my understanding was obviously everyone submitted their proposals under the European FSA guidelines, and now, because obviously we're going to be stepping away from the EU, they've got to be resubmitted to the FSA in January, I believe, of next year. Is that, and then the process starts from there? Does that sound about right? Or?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. So what the FSA did is they've effectively mirrored the European procedure. The issue for the UK is that formally, the FSA cannot start considering dossier submissions until the 1st of January, because we are subject to EU regulations until the end of the transition period. The UK FSA have taken a very sensible position. They have said companies can submit to the UK regulators now, and they will consider the dossier informally, and they'll actually provide some feedback, some engagement to make sure that when they start considering formally from the 1st of January, your dossier is in a good position, you're in good shape. We had some concerns that if the FSA suddenly received 50, 100 or 150 dossier submissions on the 1st of January, they wouldn't have the time, the resources to consider all of those dossiers within a 3-month period. Those fears have been allayed by the FSA by saying, look, they'll actually start an informal process now. So you can actually make your dossier submission to the FSA now, informally, and then hopefully that should be in the pile to be rubber stamped come 1st of January. The European position has changed now. So all of the companies that submitted a novel food dossier to the European Commission, probably about a month ago, I think it was now, they received a letter from the European Commission saying that they were pausing consideration of all of these CBD novel food submissions. In fact, it's not all of them, it's the ones where CBD are derived from the fruiting and flowering tops. All of those have been paused because the European Commission says they're going to review the status of CBD and are looking to reclassify it as a narcotic. Now this is mental. This is completely mental, because it's the European Commission that are the ones that designated CBD as a novel food way back in January 2019. So you can imagine.
I thought they came up with a whole.
This was their idea. That's right. So you've had all of these companies spending big money, putting a lot of effort into ramping up European operations, and then all of a sudden the European Commission is suggesting that they're going to pull the rug out from under them. So you can imagine this has caused real concern. However, I'm feeling quite calm about things, and there's a couple of reasons on this. First of all, this isn't a fixed position, right? This is just a suggestion. In my mind, the likelihood is it will never actually come to that. It just wouldn't be right, given that the novel food regime was implemented back in January 2019 by the European Commission. The second point is, if the European Commission crystallizes their position and does identify CBD as a narcotic, the litigation that they will be inundated with at that point is going to have them wrapped up for months, if not years. So I think they will have to tread very carefully as to whether they want to go down this route, because whilst there's no fixed position, you can't make a legal challenge in the European courts. As soon as they fix that position, that's when the opportunity to challenge the decision in the European Court of Justice suddenly becomes available, and you can imagine there'll be lots of businesses ready for that.
Well, I was going to say thousands. You know, it's a pretty substantial industry across Europe, and the thing is, it seems like they'll be shooting themselves in the foot with it. It's just going to cause themselves problems.
Yeah, look,
seems like they grabbed the idea out of the sky. You know,
yeah, there's lots of sort of talk about why this has happened, or why this has suddenly become an issue. I don't know the reasons. Some people are suggesting that it's the French government are unhappy with the Canavape decision.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Other people are suggesting that it may be the big pharma lobby in the background saying we want to take CBD out of the wellness sector. So that's the current situation. The advice I'm saying to clients who want to still sell CBD in Europe is that you should still be submitting your novel food dossier to the European Commission. Even though they've paused consideration of these dossiers, get your dossier in the queue, because if they row back from this reclassification, they'll start reconsidering, and you want to make sure that your dossier is in the queue and ready to be considered as soon as they're ready to go.
Yeah, definitely. Now, do you think COVID's going to create a bit more of a backlog, or is it just going to be more of an excuse rather than?
I can only talk about the UK position. FSA has made it clear they're not changing that date. You know, there's been lots of representations to them to push back their 31st of March cutoff to give businesses a bit more time, given the state of the pandemic situation. They won't do it. That 31st of March date appears to be set in stone, and you know, we've not received any information that they're willing to push back because of COVID.
Right. Okay. Well, I think we can both agree. Really, it's definitely something that the industry in the UK needs, some form of proper regulation in place. Whether we agree with how it's been undertaken or not, it's still something that the industry needed.
Yeah, look, I think there's parallels to be drawn with the vape sector. So when the Tobacco Products Directive was introduced, I think everyone started to lose their marbles. You know, everyone was going mental, saying, well, we don't know how to deal with this. Now, TPD appears to be fairly well managed. People understand how it works. There's a simple registration process for new vape products. It's not overly expensive. We hope that's how novel foods will develop. You know, the next year or two will be a period where the industry is getting to grips with how the process works. Thereafter, you should see a return to innovation, new products, more business being introduced, because people are now familiar with how the process works.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, looking on the bright side of all of this, hopefully it will free up some of the problems that obviously CBD companies have when it comes to marketing their products as well, especially with regards to marketing on Facebook, Instagram, those type of things. Because obviously there's a number of restrictions in place. So the fact is now that with the foods being, with the novel foods regulations, providing some sort of peace of mind to consumers, hopefully it sort of opens up the doors a bit more for sort of actual brands to get their products out there. Which is
ultimately, novel foods is about consumer safety. That's what this is all about. Consumer safety is really important because we want consumer confidence. Consumer confidence breeds market stability, and that means that this industry is here to stay, and that it can continue to grow because everyone knows that consumers are getting high quality products. The idea is to bring this industry into the mainstream, and I'm very happy to see lots of CBD companies are now knocking on the door of mainstream marketing channels and using advertising mediums that have been reserved for more mainstream products. So now you will see CBD ads on the tube. I think you guys had an ad on the tube, didn't you, for your your conference?
I was thinking, like, some of the hoops we had to jump through to get the advertising on the tube. Obviously, Christina's much better placed to tell us about that. But so the phrasing of and having the word cannabis in the actual advert, things like that. The stigma that is still attached to
absolutely.
The class is like unbelievable, really.
No,
but,
and credit to you guys. Yours was one of the first I saw. I think I took a photo of it and sent it to Sal because I was so happy to see it. But I'm sure you have to be persistent about these things. As soon as you start engaging with the Advertising Standards Agency over the content of your ads, the pushback is substantial. They treat it very cautiously. The negative approach to how they interpret things is very disappointing, but you've got to push on beyond that and be confident that what you're doing is right and what you're advertising is legal, and not be afraid of pushing back hard with the Advertising Standards Agency. And lots of companies have done it now. You've got CBD products on QVC, you've got billboard campaigns happening. I saw an ad for a CBD brand on Sky News primetime one evening, which was great. I mean, it wasn't the best quality looking brand, but they probably had to strip a lot of stuff out to get it past the Advertising Standards Agency. But at least they've done it. It's an incredible achievement, and hopefully we'll see more of that in the next year or two. Yeah,
definitely. The way we're looking at it, once it becomes more sort of, known to the wider public that it is now being classed as a food ingredient, that allays a lot of the fears that sort of many people would have been having it attached to cannabis, let's say, because of the stigma that people have grown up with. So hopefully it's we're turning the corner and getting that changed anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think so.
Let's move on then, Robert, to greater access now to medical cannabis. We'll move away from CBD because do you see the access to medical cannabis changing in the UK post-COVID and also post-Brexit? This is the other thing. We see it, there's a lot of talk now about it being fully legalized at the federal level in the US. I think they've got a vote coming up pretty soon. How do you see the medical cannabis market opening in the UK?
I think we can all agree that we're disappointed with how things have progressed since November 2018. I think obviously we go to a lot of conferences and they have panels on medical cannabis, and disappointingly it's been the last 18 months it's been the same things being said on these panels again and again and again. Nothing's changed. However, hopefully we are starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. There's a lot of great organizations out there who are working very hard to, first of all, produce that safety and efficacy data that the regulators like NICE that they want, to be able to push forward this regime. The information I have is that in number 10, they're very unhappy that things have not developed in the way that they should have. So hopefully Boris Johnson, when he's got time, is going around giving people at the Department of Health a kick to get things moving. And this is a real opportunity, as you said, with Brexit as well, to put the UK right at the centre of the medicinal cannabis regime. We have to hope that COVID will encourage this government to take steps that perhaps they wouldn't have done before, and that will be things like making sure that British farmers can cultivate cannabis and compete with our European colleagues and neighbours, and making sure that the medicinal cannabis industry can grow and can thrive here. Because you're absolutely right. With this pandemic, the thing we're going to need is job creation and tax revenue. And a legal cannabis industry is an easy win, if you ask me. I hope that COVID will actually speed up legalization on a global basis.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The way I look at it personally, and obviously we do as a company as well, is the fact that you've only got to look at the fact cannabis was an essential service, an essential product during the lockdown in California. Now, I guess it was in other states as well. I only sort of really read about California, but that in itself says a hell of a lot. You still got people in prison serving out their time for small amounts of cannabis, and yet it's also deemed an essential service. So there seems to be, I don't know how society can have its wires crossed so much. And when it comes to access to medical cannabis, we can see the increase in private clinics here in the UK. Now, as much as a lot of NHS doctors obviously want to prescribe it, their hands seem to be tied a bit when it comes to not only their own education, which is something that we look to address with our events, but also the fact that their hands are tied by being able to prescribe it, because obviously without the lack of clinical trials here in the UK, when there's a lot of clinical research available elsewhere globally. I'm a bit confused about us not being able to tap into that current existing research and sort of put that to good use, really.
Yeah, so I think there's two issues here. The first is knowledge and education, which you're absolutely right, and much like your organisation, there are other organisations as well that are out there working very hard to train doctors on cannabis medications, dosages, that sort of thing, and like I said, to persuade the regulators that there is sufficient safety and efficacy data behind these medications as well. The regulators, the MHRA, NICE, all of these regulators, they are not prepared to give cannabis an exception. They are treating it like they would any other pharmaceutical industry. So yes, the hurdles that have to be jumped are high, but I wouldn't say they're any different for any other aspect of the pharmaceutical industry. Thankfully, the will, the effort, the funding appears to be there to push things in the right direction. And I think we'll see some big changes in the next 2 to 3 years, and hopefully access will increase substantially. The other issue which I do want to touch on is, particularly as you mentioned, private clinics, which obviously is a positive thing, and this is what we want to see, but we've got to do something to address the financial discrimination that is endemic within this medicinal cannabis system, because right now it's only the very wealthy or the very fortunate who have crowdfunding funding behind them that can actually access these medications, and I think that needs to end. One particular case which was of interest was the Leslie Gibson prosecution, which I think ended earlier this year. So interestingly, the Crown Prosecution Service dropped that case against Leslie Gibson on the first day of trial, and the rationale behind them doing that was that she was now in receipt of a private prescription, and she was paying for it. I think it was something like 800 quid a month, which is a lot of money. Most of us can't.
Crazy.
But they said because she was now in receipt of a private prescription and she was paying for it, so it was being fulfilled, there was no public interest in pursuing a prosecution. Well, that's great for Leslie Gibson, and I'm happy that they did drop the case. But for the vast majority of other people who don't have that kind of money, they would have faced prosecution in the criminal courts, and that's just wrong. So it's not just a case of addressing the safety and the efficacy. We've got to address the financial situation to help open up access to people, to patients as well.
Yeah, definitely, because otherwise, obviously, a lot of people are going to the black market or criminalising themselves by growing at home. Now, I'm very much a big believer in the right to grow for people, because, it's part of the civil liberties as well. But, I do like some of the other models that we are seeing develop, like the model in Colorado, but also, the model in Canada as well. I know it has a lot of critics, but, it does seem, they had a medical cannabis policy in place for a number of years now, and it seems to be working through a lot of the creases and troubles, let's say, that we are going to encounter when we bring it in the UK.
Yeah, look, and the fact that there are other countries and jurisdictions where there's been legal cannabis for some time, that gives us a guideline. We can see what they did right, we can see what they did wrong, and we can learn from that, and there shouldn't be any barriers to us implementing a regime that works well for everybody.
Well, the last point then, which is a bit of a grey area here in the UK, not so much so in Europe, especially in Switzerland and Germany as well. It's the CBD and hemp flower legality. Yeah. So basically, pretty much to the non-smoker, it's basically low THC weed. Pretty much is what it is. So you know, there's a lot of confusion here in the UK that people seem to think because there's no THC in it that it's actually legal, and that isn't the case at all. There's been a number of seizures, a number of raids of people holding CBD flower, and yet in Germany or Switzerland, it's actually used as a tobacco replacement, so sold in pharmacies. So, you know, you can see the differences that we encounter, because if you were to be arrested here with CBD flower, you would still be treated as normal from what I understand. So if you can give us a little bit of a quick heads up on that really, Robert, and you know, what are the implications for it in the UK and how do the police look at it really?
Yeah, so it's a really difficult situation at the moment. Selling hemp flower or CBD flower, as it's also called, is a very lucrative business, and there's a lot of companies out there running as legitimate companies. You know, they're registered with Companies House, they're paying tax, they are legitimate companies, and they're making a lot of money from selling this product. However, a number of these companies have been subjected to police intervention. I think one of the most high-profile ones was the Canna Kitchen down in Brighton a year or two ago. So they were selling hemp flower upstairs, and the police came in very heavy-handed. They didn't just take the hemp flower, they took all of their CBD products and effectively shut them down. And they are going to trial quite soon. I think they are going to be having a trial. They were charged with possession with intent to supply of a Class B drug. So the police and the CPS approach to hemp flower is that they do not make a distinction between high THC and low THC. To them, it's just cannabis. It's all cannabis, and therefore it's illegal to sell. I don't think that this position is correct, and I think there's a lot of domestic and international regulations which provide a strong argument against that position. But until there are actually some test cases that go through the criminal courts and also, you know, cases that will have to go onto the High Court for interpretation from judges, right now selling hemp flower is a risky business, because not only are you at risk of arrest and prosecution, if you are convicted, all of the money that you made from selling that product will now be deemed proceeds of crime. So then you could be subjected to some really serious POCA proceedings. So right now, if a client says to me, can I sell this? It's not something I can give them a green light to do. You know, I can highlight the risks to them, and they'll make a decision as to whether they want to proceed. The frustrating thing for businesses is that this enforcement action is not being uniformly applied across the country. So in some jurisdictions, businesses are actually receiving emails or letters from local police saying, yes, what you're doing is fine. And then in, you know, a neighbouring borough, they're getting arrested and prosecuted. So we call this, we call this capriciousness, the way that the CPS and the police are applying this policy is not uniform. You know, it's a bit of a postcode lottery. Some businesses are having no problems at all, and in fact being formally told they can crack on. But a lot of are sort of running big risk of serious police intervention. So it's a tough one at the moment.
Right, yeah, and probably only going to become more and more prevalent from what we can see, because it seems to be loads of it out there at the moment.
Well, you know what? You'd think the police would have better things to focus on than, you know, a product that isn't actually even getting anybody high, and quite the opposite. It's doing lots of good things. Yeah. No, exactly. But there we are. You know, where the pressure is coming from for certain police forces to start enforcing on this, I don't know. It could be that it's that POCA proceedings. They see it as an easy win and an opportunity to take that money. That could be the motivation, but you know, I would suggest the police should have lots of better things to spend their time on. But that's just my own feeling.
To be fair, I think that a lot of police will agree with you on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you heard of the latest of the Canna card, the new medical cannabis card that was put forward?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your views on that? I had a quick read up on that the other day, and it looks like it could serve its purpose. So have you had much look into it at all?
Yeah, I have actually. So I think it's a really great endeavour by Carly Barton and the team around her. The most important part will be agreement from police and local authorities. If they can get overt support from police commissioners, from local authorities, confirming that they will recognize this card, then that's great. That's the really tough part, because you know, this card won't act as a get out of jail free card unless the authorities agree to it. So she's dealing with the right people who have the right connections with the decision makers. So hopefully it'll end up being a really positive endeavor, and it'll give comfort to a lot of people who are, you know, medicating at home, self-medicating, but can't afford private prescriptions, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a great step forward. So, well, thanks ever so much, Robert. I think what we'll do now, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So I think we've got a couple filling up here. So I'll hand over to Christina. And Christina, what would you like to hit Robert with first? Seems like there's quite a few on there.
Well, actually, those that are currently on a chat have been answered.
Oh, okay.
There we go. I'm very thorough.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've done your revision on this one, Robert.
Yeah.
Excellent. But if anyone would like to ask a question, you can ask directly. You would just need to unmute yourself, or I can unmute you, and you can basically speak. You don't need to type.
Yeah, because I definitely think, you know, anyone wants to discuss this Canna card, I must say, I think that's something that we definitely need to be looking at. But it's still early days, isn't it? Stephen?
Hi guys, I met you guys in Dublin back in pre-COVID days, before in the Shelburne in Dublin.
Yeah, we were discussing that actually just before the call started. That was a really good event, and a good night out afterwards as well.
We were all heading off to Spanibus the next week, and
that's when it all got cancelled, wasn't it? Yeah, that was crazy.
The world fell off its cliff.
Yeah.
So I'm here in Barcelona. I'm a medical refugee, you could say, and so I've kind of I'm part of a kind of we're trying to establish, like much like the kind of the English Cannabis Alliance, like getting the Patients Alliance, which doesn't exist. We're just a disparate bunch of stories. I'm an MS patient, and but I've been using medical cannabis for many years, and it's it's a vital part of my life. And so that's why I'm here in Barcelona, because I got my plants out on the terrace outside, and I can get I've got complete supports here or whatever. And so I'm just wondering about, my question is really, the Canna card is very interesting, and looks like that's happening, and I'm wondering, we're going to be pushing then obviously to try and copy that, if we can push our boys in Ireland, and our boys and girls in Ireland, to kind of push that on. That's a great idea. And because I've been refused licenses for the last 2 years in Ireland. Ireland has a medical cannabis access program, and it's under ministerial license, but I've been refused for the last 2 years. So it's still a horrific kind of scenario in Ireland for most people that are pursuing any kind of medical cannabis routes. And I'm just, my question is really then, it's a broad question about the EU. I mean, I've heard a lot of noise about France is the big mover. I mean, Spain, it's still illegal here, but I'm a member of 5 dispensaries, but it's still technically illegal. France I've heard on the grapevine that France is kind of investing behind the scenes, very, very big. I'm just wondering, what is your real feeling about, is there going to be, I mean, this started out as a CBD EU kind of reclassification, and but what's going on in the general kind of cannabis space on an EU level and European level?
I think the important thing to remember is that countries like Spain and Portugal in particular, they have been leaders in progressive drug policy. So as long ago as, I think it was 2001, Portugal decriminalized possession of all drugs. And this was a step that they took to address rampant, drug addiction at the time. And it's been incredibly successful by treating the issue as a public health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. They've had tremendous effects. You would hope that evidence from progressive drug policies like that would lead to not just decriminalization across the continent, but actual legalization. We've got Luxembourg, which I think is going to go fully legal, in the next year or two. Luxembourg's a small country. I think, what we're talking, 300,000 people or something like that. But that will be a good test country, and I'm sure all of the other EU countries will be watching on to see how it goes. Assuming Luxembourg doesn't immediately burn to the ground, then I think you'll see lots of other European countries pushing hard to follow in those footsteps.
Sorry to interject there. I lived in Maastricht back in the early 90s. And it was just spinning off the kind of, Maastricht would have been one of the first needle park towns in terms of drug policy within Holland. Yep. And it's also one of the biggest, because of the nature of it, the fact that it's sandwiched down in the bottom of Limburg. Yep. And it's sandwiched between so many, it has the biggest, at that time, it had the biggest kind of coffee shops in all of Holland were down there, because people were traveling from all the other countries, Germany, France, and all that. So I think that Luxembourg, it looks like that, I can imagine that's what it's going to get, man. It's going to become the tourist resort for a lot of people.
And look, it's 2020 now, okay, and we need to start. I'll take issue with the use of, I don't like the use of the word recreational cannabis. I think that I think that, yeah, exactly. I think recreational cannabis trivializes the matter. It's adult use. We're adults. We make these decisions for ourselves. We have the information, and we can make informed choices. And there's many reasons why people do use cannabis. I always get told, no, don't talk about recreational cannabis or adult use cannabis in the UK. I don't see why we shouldn't be having that conversation. And I think hopefully we'll see that being addressed across Europe very soon.
So the question was really, where is the lobbying coming within Europe? So in terms of, if we were to kind of add our Irish voice into that European mix, then where should we direct that, do you think? But what's your opinion on that? So that's really my question. Sorry.
So lobbying in Europe is a very specialised thing, and the only person I know directly that has experience is Lorenza Romanesi at Aya. She was a lobbyist for the wine industry in the EU for several years before taking up the position at Aya, and she is first class at what she does. She knows how things work in Europe, and she knows how to get things done. So that's the type of person, the type of organisation that we need to get behind in order to get things moving in Europe, because it's a big, complex behemoth of a organisation. You have to play the game in order to get what you want, and so the current projects that Aya are running in Europe, I think, are really positive, and I would certainly encourage everyone to get behind them.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Stephen.
Cheers. So what about here in the UK, Robert, with regards to our lobbying actions, let's say?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think we all know Blair Gibbs, formerly of the CMC, is now Boris Johnson's drug policy advisor in Number 10. There are organisations like Voltfas who have good connections still with Blair, and I'm engaged with Voltfas on the Pleasant Lands campaign to try and open up hemp cultivation for British farmers, which I think is a really positive endeavour. And hopefully you should be hearing more about the Pleasant Lands campaign with their formal release of their policy paper at the end of this month. So that's a really exciting project that I've been fortunate to be involved in. And I think that's the way the lobbying approach is working here in the UK, step by step, chipping off bits here and there that are achievable until we get to the final end position, rather than trying to make huge big jumps. We've got to take it step by step and ease our way into it. But Voltfas are doing a lot of good work in that sector at the moment.
So going back to like the adult use cannabis as well, with the social clubs that exist. Obviously, Stephen, you're in Barcelona. There's a number of social clubs in Spain, and they're springing up a lot more here in the UK as well. Now, the legality issues within Spain, we realise they do have a bit more of a relaxed approach, to say, in certain areas. Here in the UK, with the cannabis clubs and the social clubs, as it were, Robert, do you hear about these guys experience a lot of trouble when it comes to local constabulary, or again, does it depend where they are?
Yeah, so I've been providing some pro bono advice to an organisation called the Chilling Rooms, And the idea behind the chilling rooms is to set up a cannabis, a social club where people who are using cannabis for medical reasons but can't afford private prescriptions, they have a place to engage socially. They can bring their own cannabis and smoke it on site. Obviously they asked me saying, can you make this legal for us? And I said, look, I'm not a magician. There's a particular offence which is a problem for these types of clubs, and this is allowing or suffering your premises to be used for the consumption of drugs. Okay, so it's a very specific offence, and that's where the risk is for anybody running a cannabis social club or anything along those lines and allowing people to smoke cannabis on their premises. That's the offence that you'll get caught on. The way to address that is, again, like the can card endeavour, you have to get the police, local police and the local authorities to agree. You're effectively asking for a limited exemption, a limited decriminalisation in a certain area. If you can get them on board, then you're good to go. And it has happened in other areas. So in Leeds, there's an area called Holbeck where there is a decriminalised zone for sex work, and this has been agreed with the police authorities, with the local authorities, provided this sex work is taking place in a certain area, there will be no police intervention. So local authorities and and police commissioners do have the power to engage in these types of projects. That is the sort of agreement you're going to need to be able to reduce your risk of police intervention. So it's not an easy task, but there are lots of people out there trying.
Cool.
And I offer something on that. I've been in Spain, in Barcelona, since 2002. I run the comedy festival here and a bunch of stuff. But basically, Spain has an inherent kind of culture of, like, literally every street has the right to create an association, which when they want to throw when they want to throw a party for the street, then they can apply to get portaloos and stuff like that as an association. The Barca Football Club is technically an association, so it's very much part of the culture. This thing of being an association, and out of that is where the dispensaries have come from. They're all a growers' association. Technically, we are legally allowed to grow 4 plants, and so that's where But Spain, it's still illegal. You still can smoke on site. Everybody has to be a member that's on site. Technically, that's what it is.
Yeah, I think
Right.
An aspect of membership and vetting of members will always be important. It's got to be done within a controlled environment. But like I said, you need the agreement of the local authorities to be able to do that.
Okay, brilliant.
Okay,
Thanks ever so much, Robert.
We have questions. Just a second. Oh, actually, no, these are not questions. These are product.
Does anyone have any more questions at all, guys? No, we've run on pretty good, actually. It's really informative. Thanks ever so much, Robert. It was a great chat.
It's been a pleasure. No, it's good to catch up as well.
And
I very much look forward to seeing everyone in person at the next ECE event, whenever that may be, because I think we're all missing them very much.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And watch this space. Well, everyone, Robert will be joining us actually as one of our guest speakers in London next year. And we're working on a couple of other plans as well. So we will keep you posted. But we want to get back to live events as soon as possible. So if there aren't any more questions, I think we'll look to wrap it up and let Robert get on with his day, and obviously everyone else as well, really. So.
All right. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. Good to see you all.
Cool. Cheers, guys.
All right,
Thanks,
guys. All the best. Catch you later. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.